This is the new Toyota Corolla Cross Hybrid. It's now here in Malaysia, and more than that, this is locally assembled in Bukit Raja, Klang. This, according to Toyota, is the best technology to bring Malaysians into the near future. Turbocharging, it says, is not the right way forward because it increases fuel consumption too much. And full electric vehicle, we're not there yet because we do lack the infrastructure. We're not ready for that, anywhere near ready for that yet. So this, according to Toyota, is the best answer. Hybrid. This gives you the extra performance as well as very low fuel consumption. So the Toyota Corolla Cross Hybrid, how does it compare against its closest rivals, the Honda HR-V and of course the Proton X50? Now let's find out. The Corolla Cross is Toyota's very late answer to the all-conquering Honda HR-V. Ever since the Honda was launched in Malaysia in 2015, it has absolutely dominated the SUV market over here. Not a single model has come even close to the HR-V, though many have tried. Toyota, however, has completely missed out on this extremely lucrative segment. Here in Malaysia, by far the most popular non-national car segment is of course the B segment sedan. And for those people, the next upgrade path, the most natural upgrade for them would be a small or rather mid-size SUV. That's where the HR-V came in perfectly, and it came together with the whole SUV boom that took over Malaysians, and it was the perfect car for that moment. Toyota has taken a very long time to respond to it, and its first response was the CHR, which ultimately proved to be a little bit too small, a little bit too expensive to be a proper rival for the HR-V. Fast forward a couple of years, we now have the Toyota Corolla Cross. The name itself is quite interesting. Instead of using a random batch of letters like the CHR, Toyota is now using its most popular moniker, the Corolla. Corolla is the moniker with the best-selling cars over the past 50 years or so. And now this is the car that is going to carry the name across to the modern age, the Corolla Cross. Now, the Corolla name implies that this is a C-segment SUV, and Toyota is also marketing this as a C-segment SUV as well. The HR-V, however, has always been referred to as a B-segment SUV. But, you know, in Malaysia, we don't really care about segments anymore. We just buy according to price and size, and this car goes directly against the HR-V. So this is Toyota's answer to the Honda HR-V, despite the different segments in it's all technicalities. You can pretty much forget about it. This is the alternative to the Honda HR-V from Toyota. Now, of course, in terms of absolute size, this is a little bit bigger than the HR-V. It's a bit longer overall. Its wheelbase is a bit more compared to the HR-V as well. But that's only because this is a much newer model. By the time the second generation Honda HR-V comes out, probably around this year, it's going to be all neutralized. So these two cars are going head to head again. The same goes with pricing as well. The Corolla Cross starts at 123,000 ringgit, while this top-of-the-line hybrid goes for 137,000 ringgit. That's a little bit more than the Honda HR-V, but assuming the HR-V is going to up its price when the new one comes in, yeah, again, I'm expecting the two cars to be very similarly priced later on. Now, those of you familiar with the matter will know that the Corolla Cross is not a brand new model, not even here in Malaysia. It has been launched sometime last year, but back then it was fully imported from Thailand. And more than that, the very first model that we were introduced to, the one that we got familiar with, was the base level 1.8G. So I don't think that was a great introduction for the Corolla Cross, especially with its, you know, low rent headlights and interior. and the small wheels. But now we are finally going to be reintroduced to the proper Corolla Cross, the one with the better looking lights and of course the bigger wheels. So let's talk about looks for a moment, because the Corolla Cross has been a little bit controversial in this department. On the outside, a lot of people think it's a little bit bland. Well, I think there's some truth in that. It's not quite, say, as striking or visually appealing as most of its rivals, especially in the SUV market. And especially from the back, it does look a little bit meh, a bit bland, a bit rounded, a bit anonymous. It doesn't quite scream like this is a very modern SUV. But at the same time, it does have a lot of interesting details to it. These lights have this rather unique, big sweeping shape to it, and especially for this hybrid version, there's that big piece of blue strip. It does catch your eyes very well. And then there's the grille as well. There's a big mammoth grille up front. It's also framed in nice piano black finish. This, I would say, is a very imposing, or rather recognizable car on the road. Whether you think it's pretty or not, that's up to your own taste, of course. But overall, this is not a bad looking car. Specifically for the hybrid, as you can see, there's a lot of blue highlights on the logos front and back, and of course there's the blue strip of the headlights, as I mentioned, and the customary hybrid badges on the front fenders as well as the back. But beyond that, this looks nearly identical to the 1.8V version of the Corolla Cross. This car is being reintroduced for the Malaysian market now that it's being locally assembled together with the rest of the range as well. And with it come quite a few improvements compared to the CBU model. First of all is the inclusion of a roof rail on this car. It's two little tiny strips at the top, but they're not just cosmetic items, they are actually functional. They can carry up to 70 kilos of weight. Another change that you can visually see are the tires. Well, the ones that come from Thailand carried Michelin Primacy 4 tires. The ones that are made here in Malaysia are using Toyo Proxys CR1 tires. Now, I know it may look like a bit of a downgrade going from Michelin to Toyo, but Toyota insists that all the measurable performance, the fuel economy, the rolling resistance, the refinement, the tire noise, it's all comparable to the Michelin. And despite the Proxys branding, these are eco-friendly touring tires. These are not fast-wearing sports tires like, say, a Pilot Sport 4 from Michelin. So you don't have to worry about that in the long run. In terms of looks overall, the only thing I want to comment on is the fact that this car uses color-coded front lip as well as the rear diffuser area. It's not so bad when you buy a car in white or grey, very muted or neutral colors, but when it comes to the funky bright colors like the blue and the red, you now have bright blue or bright red front lip and rear diffuser. That's a bit of an eyesore, I think. But like I said, not a bad looking car overall, and in white or grey, it's quite fetching, I think. Now let's move on to the interior, where it's again a little bit bland, not exactly exciting, but you know what? The quality here is pretty impressive. On first impressions, the build quality is quite good. Most of the touch points, including the entire door card, the center half of the dashboard, it's all nice and soft touch, although the entire top piece is all hard plastics, and there's a bit of a shiny surface look to them as well. Not exactly fantastic, but the bits that you do touch on a regular basis do feel quite good. Now, this layout was chosen specifically for the ASEAN market. If you do buy the Corolla Cross in Japan, in Europe or in the US, the top half is also going to be soft touch, but this has been redeveloped for our climate. You know, it's always hot all year long, so they want to avoid the top part being, you know, melted and sticky in the long run, so we have this. So in the end, they still do put in a bit of soft touch materials here on the lower half, where it's not quite getting that intense sunlight all year long. So overall, I think it's not too bad. In terms of perceived quality, I still rank this slightly higher compared to, say, a Honda HR-V. Now on to the details. There are only very few things that are specific to this top-of-the-range hybrid version. The most major of all is the inclusion of a fully digital instrument cluster. You get a much bigger screen with the hybrid compared to the regular petrol-powered variants, and I think it does look pretty good. There's multiple themes to choose from when you choose your drive modes. In sport it goes full red, in normal or eco it goes blue. I think it does look very good. It does set you in the mood to whatever settings you put it in. Beyond that, it's also extremely legible. The speedometer is absolutely massive. There's no way you can not see the speed that you're going at. The only thing is that there is no rev counter. It has been completely replaced by Toyota's eco power charging meter thing on the left, so you're not quite sure how much revs the engine is pulling. Yeah, that's a bit of a shame. So that will take a little bit of getting used to, I think. But I find the interface here very, very interesting. I especially like the one where it shows where the power is coming from, whether you're powering the wheels through the engine alone, or the combination of the engine and the battery motors, or even if you're charging the battery using the engine power. You see all that very clearly here. It's quite amusing to see. Beyond that, like I said, the changes are very minimal. Well, the power button is now finished in blue instead of regular black, and you now have a dual zone climate control system on this car compared to a single zone version in the regular petrol units. In terms of cabin amenities, this is a pretty basic car. There's no fancy toys to play with. There's no, metal buttons to look at or whatever. It's all plasticky. It's all pretty basic, but it's not such a bad thing. This is a mass market family SUV after all. The big center screen is extremely large at 9 inches, and it does support Apple CarPlay, so that is a very good thing. My one gripe is that the cable is built into the head unit itself, so it's always sticking out when you're using Apple CarPlay. That to me just screams aftermarket. It's not as well integrated as in most other cars with Apple CarPlay. But functionality wise, it's perfect. The screen is very easy to use, together with the aircon system, which is very, very cold. It's all quite nice and pleasant car to be in. The seats are quite comfortable as well. I would say these are slightly more comfortable than the ones in the HR-V, and definitely way more supportive than the ones in the Proton X50. The biggest drawback of this Corolla Cross to me is the use of a foot parking brake instead of an electronic parking brake like in most of its rivals, the HR-V, the X50. All those have moved on to the much more modern EPB. Here you're stuck with a foot operated parking brake, a manual handbrake. Now this has actual feature repercussions later on, which I will explain to you when it comes to the active safety bits, but just the look and feel of it, it just looks old school. Now this is something that you wouldn't even think of if you're just so used to having a handbrake or a regular manual parking brake. You wouldn't think that it is such a big deal. But the very first time you drive a car with electronic parking brake, the moment you get used to it, you just cannot go back to a manual system. Me, having driven cars with EPB for many years now, I think I've had an EPB for, I'm not sure, 8-9 years now. Going back to this just feels like you've gone back in time. This to me is unacceptable for a car in this price range, a brand new one at this price as well. But let's talk about practicality, because the Corolla Cross is really good in that department. Talking about the rear seats, it is extremely spacious. It is just about as big as the Honda HR-V in the back, which again just shows the genius of Honda in terms of interior packaging. But anyway, it really is as big as that in the back of this car. Another big advantage for the Corolla Cross is the inclusion of rear aircon vents, which the HR-V lacks. Of course, in Malaysia, having rear aircon vents is an absolute must. There is no way you can survive in the back without rear aircon vents, and with this car, the inclusion of that is the bare minimum. Now for rear passengers, you also get much bigger side windows with this car compared to the HR-V, because that car has that rear hidden door handle with a sloping rear roof line at the top. So this, I think, is a more fitting shape for a big family SUV. The rear seats can also be reclined by 6 degrees, and I know Matt have said that it's only ever comfortable in the most reclined position. Me, I prefer sitting a bit more upright, and in both configurations I find the seats to be very comfortable, even more so than in the HRV. Another advantage to the Corolla Cross is the fact that you can actually fit 3 adults in the back, whereas in the HRV it's going to be a very tight fit. The Honda has always been very spacious in terms of leg room, but in terms of shoulder room, it's always been fit for 2 rather than 3. The Corolla Cross, you can just about fit 3 in the back there. Now, in terms of boot space, it's about equal between the Honda and the Toyota. The Corolla Cross has 440 liters of room space in the back there, and that is quite impressive, especially considering this is a hybrid and the boot space is exactly the same as the ones in the regular petrol powered model. The battery pack is hidden under the rear seat, so it doesn't take up any space. The one thing where it loses out to the HRV is of course the Honda's magic seats. That is still the class of the field. There's nothing that can even match that. So you can carry, tall items in the back in the cabin. This car, you can't. Now let's talk about the all-important hybrid part of this car. Under the hood is a 1.8 litre naturally aspirated Atkinson cycle engine. That engine has been intentionally down-tuned compared to the regular 1.8 in the petrol-powered Corolla Cross. That is all in the name of efficiency, fuel economy. So while the regular petrol Corolla Cross makes 139 PS and 172 Newton meters of torque, the one in this car, although it uses the same 1.8 liters of capacity, it only makes 89 PS and 143 Newton meters of torque. That is a steep downgrade. But before you worry too much, this is a hybrid, so right next to the engine is an electric motor. This adds on an additional 73 PS and 162 Newton meters of torque. Now, Toyota only has one figure for a claimed power output, which is 122 PS. This is what it deems to be the overall net effect of having the engine and the electric motors. It's not as simple as just combining the numbers, adding them up, and say 300 horsepower, 400 Newton meters of torque, and just be done with it. The thing is, while the electric motor can give out the full output from 0 RPM, from no revs at all, the engine still needs some revs to create its maximum power. The peak torque only happens way above 3000 RPM. So when you're driving off from a standstill, the overlap of the engine and the petrol power, and there is no point where the peak power comes from both the electric motor and the engine at the same time, and that is why you can't just combine the numbers and claim massive power gains overall. But despite the hybrid having lower overall power outputs, combined power outputs compared to the regular petrol, this is 122 versus 139 for the other one. This is the faster of the two variants. There are no official acceleration power figures for these cars, but they have told us that according to internal testing, from 0 to 50, this is a full 2 seconds quicker going from 0 to 50. That, I think, is a lot more important compared to a traditional 0 to 100 kilometer sprint, because how often do you jump from 0 to 100 kilometers straight away? What is more important is the initial acceleration, and there the difference is actually quite big. As you move on from 0 to 50 to 0 to 80 and 0 to 100, the differences get lower and lower. But even up to 0 to 100, this is still the faster car. According to Toyota's own data, this takes about 13.5-ish seconds from 0 to 100. The regular petrol takes a full second slower at almost 14.5 seconds. So overall, yeah, none of these cars are actually performance cars. None of these cars are actually quick, especially compared to more modern turbocharged cars and whatnot, but it's adequately powerful in my books. So, like for instance, you want to overtake a small lorry on the highway, you just give it a bit of a throttle, and yeah, it takes little to no time to go from 80 to 110 to give you enough boost to accelerate to overtake a lorry. it doesn't feel overstressed. I think it feels, effortless enough. But the overall experience of driving this hybrid is actually very, very pleasant, especially in town where you're driving very slowly. Most of the time you're driving in full EV mode. And even when the engine does come in, it does so very graciously, very smoothly. It's not like a sudden surge where the engine comes in and the car moves forward and you hear the engine come in very loudly. It all happens very smoothly. It's almost imperceptible where the engine is off or on. The only way you can tell is by looking at the small little EV icon within the digital instrument cluster, and if you don't look at that, you can't really tell whether the engine is on or off. The engine, however, has a little bit of a gruff voice at higher revs. So say when you're going uphill, when the car is a little bit struggling to keep up the momentum, you can feel the engine rise up to, I would guess, because there's no rev counter here, I would guess it's going to go up to around 3,000 to 4,000 revs, and there you can actually feel the rough character of the engine. I don't know why it's so, a little bit rough and gruff at that point, but that is my only complaint for this powertrain over here. Now on to fuel consumption, this car is absolutely magic. We've driven this car for almost 600 kilometers, and my average, believe it or not, this being a big family SUV, is around 5.5 liters per 100 kilometers. Now Toyota claims that this car can do about 23.3 kilometers per liter. That is an amazing claim, but as we all know, claims are just that, claims. In the real world, you can hardly ever get close to those really high claim numbers. But with this one, I actually caught very, very close. At 5.5, that is around 18 kilometers per liter. For a big car like this, that is impressive. There's no other word to describe it. That is extremely impressive. And I achieved that figure without even trying. I did not hypermile, I did not drive especially slowly just to get a better fuel economy figure. In fact, most of the time I was trying to keep up to a convoy that was going at silly speeds most of the time, and even despite that I was doing 5.4, 5.5 at all times. So I think if you are constantly doing 110, 120 at most, you can dip under 5, that is 20 kilometers per liter without even trying. For an SUV, for a big family car, that is fantastic, isn't it? That is not so much more than what you would get in a Viva, in a Myvi, but you're driving a much bigger car with a much bigger engine, having a much more comfortable time being inside. This is a proper upgrade for most people. Now that is perhaps the biggest advantage of having a hybrid engine compared to a turbocharged one. I drive a Proton X50 myself, and through a similar driving condition like this on the highways, I would struggle to get 6.5 to 7.5 liters per 100. Over here, it's 5.5. That is a massive margin there in the favor of this Corolla Cross Hybrid. Now let's talk about handling, where again the Corolla Cross Hybrid really does impress. Now in terms of weight, this is only 25 kilograms heavier than the regular petrol version, despite having all the complicated electric motors, the big battery piece in the back. It's only 25 kilograms heavier. Now part of that is due to the smaller fuel tank. This only has a 36 liter fuel tank compared to 45 liters in the regular petrol. Speaking of that, despite this car having a tiny fuel tank, it's as big as the ones in a Proton Viva. The driving range of this is beyond 600 kilometers. Like I said, 600 kilometers with a small 36 liter fuel tank, that is fantastic. But let's go back to handling, where this car really shines. Now if you still think that Toyotas make boring uncle cars, I don't think you've driven any modern Toyota for the past 5 years, because the recent ones have been fantastic. From the latest Corolla to even the big so-called Uncle Camry, the new Toyotas have been fantastic to drive, and the Corolla Cross is the same as well. On the way up to Penang, the convoy took us through quite a fair bit of back roads, a lot of twisty roads here and there, And you know what? This little car can handle. It feels like a much lighter car than it actually is. Throw it through a couple of corners, fast ones, low speed, tight ones. This car handles itself very, very well. The steering is quite light, but it loads up quite nicely, and the body control is brilliant for a tall SUV. Once you look more into it, you can really tell why. If you look at the engine bay, you can see the engine is placed very low within the bay. It's almost like looking at a boxer engine, and all that is to move the center of gravity of this car further and further downwards. The battery pack, which is quite heavy, is placed under the rear seats, again at the base of the platform. So the net effect is a lower center of gravity, again giving you more stability through fast corners. The beauty of the Corolla Cross is it can do all that without compromising its ride quality. In terms of comfort, this car again is fantastic. This is leagues ahead of its competitors, the Proton X50 and the Honda HR-V, both of which I'm very familiar with. Like I said, I drive an X50 myself, and my brother used to have a Honda HR-V, so I am very familiar with both of those models. Compared to those two in terms of ride comfort alone, this is miles and miles ahead. In fact, I can go as far as saying that in terms of ride comfort, this makes the HR-V feel like it's 10 years old. Of course, that's all going to change by the time the second generation HR-V comes in, but for now, exactly at this point, this is by far the most comfortable car in this class. Now let's talk about an extension of comfort, which is Refinement. This car again is quite quiet as well. Toyota claims that pretty much at all speeds, at full throttle or at constant speed, this is always a fair bit quieter compared to the regular 1.8 litre petrol version. This is because the engine has to work less hard compared to a petrol only version. So perhaps you are just rolling along at 110 like we are now. I would guess if we were in the petrol, it would be pulling around maybe 2,500 revs. With the hybrid version, together with a little bit of electric power, is doing a lot less than that. So in the end, the net effect is a quieter car overall. The bigger difference is when you're driving in town. When you're in a traffic jam, most of the time this car will be driving in full EV mode, so there's zero engine noise, zero engine vibration coming into the cabin. So the hybrid is a far more comfortable car if you're comparing between the regular hybrid versus the regular petrol version. Now, if I were to compare this against the HR-V and the Proton X50, I would still put this car in the lead in terms of overall refinement. Now, you have to discount the rough feeling engine a little bit because most of the time you don't really feel it. It's only in select moments where you're going uphill, steep climbs, where that comes in a bit more prominently. But most of the time, this is a quiet, smooth experience, much more so than its direct competitors. Now let's talk about the more advanced features of this car. Now this has the full Toyota Safety Sense 2.0. It has autonomous emergency braking, or AEB. It has dynamic radar cruise control, as most people call it, adaptive cruise control. Now the CKD version is a bit of an upgrade compared to the Thailand CBU one, where the old one only worked above a certain speed. I think it was 30 kilometers per hour. This is now an all-speed adaptive cruise control, which also means it has low speed follow. It can bring the car down even to a stop in traffic jams or very slow moving traffic. That is a big advantage this car has over the initial versions. And the way it does so is also quite impressive. This, I think, has a much more advanced version of dynamic cruise control, even compared to the Proton X50 and even compared to the Honda sensing. Every time it detects there's a car in front and you need to slow down, it does so in a very gradual manner. The way it controls the pedals are always very smooth, very gradual. It doesn't just simply jab on the brakes or even press on the throttle too much when the car in front clears. It actually feels like there is an actual person driving instead of a robot just going full 100% brakes, full 100% throttle, like you may feel in older versions of adaptive cruise control. Here it really is a very pleasant experience overall. Now, one part where this car is abnormally bad is the fact that this car uses a manual foot brake instead of an electronic parking brake. So when this car eventually comes to a stop in a traffic jam, this car can bring you to a stop, but as soon as it stops, the screen is going to ask you to press the brakes. And as soon as you do that, adaptive cruise control is cancelled out. What you need to do to make it continue is to either press a button on the steering wheel over here, or reactivate the system all over again. So that's a lot more extra steps compared to a full semi-autonomous driving level 2 where the car literally drives itself. Now with this one, it technically does when you're in moving traffic, but as soon as the car stops, it just stops doing so. So that is very, very annoying, and all that is only because we are saddled with the low spec manual parking brake over here. Now this is not unique to the Malaysian market alone. Pretty much the entire ASEAN region is using this foot brake. It's not a decision that was made specifically for Malaysia, so if you're thinking of that, you're thinking it's BMW Toyota's fault. It's not. It was made for the entire region. So in terms of active safety, while in use, this does feel a lot more pleasant than the ones in the Proton X50. The only part where it comes off very poorly is in terms of low speed follow. And of course, another thing, it does not have auto parking like the Proton X50 does. But as I always say, I've never seen a Proton X50 owner who always uses the auto parking feature. You'd use it once or twice maybe just to impress a friend or two. Beyond that, you would never ever use it again because it's just too slow, it's too cumbersome. It's not a function that you would use all the time, every day. For that, this car does have an all-around view monitor, but it's also not a very good one. This has a 3D projection of your car so you can move around and see what's around the car, but the stitching of the cameras just do not look very good. I think the Proton X50's 360 camera does look a lot better than this one. So to sum up, the Corolla Cross is an extremely pleasant car to drive. It is not the fastest car in the class, not even close, but it is by far and away the most comfortable car compared to its direct rivals. That stands a lot for me. I think if I'm looking for an SUV for my family, comfort stands for a lot more than performance. Especially right now when the Honda HR-V is feeling its age a little bit, the Corolla Cross is leagues ahead in terms of all the factors that I think is the most important for an SUV customer. It's refinement, it's comfort, leagues ahead. It makes the HR-V feel really, really old, which at this point, it really is. It desperately needs that second generation model to come as soon as possible. As for the hybrid alone, I think this is the pick of the range. It really does feel a lot more refined, a lot more powerful compared to the regular 1.8 petrol version, and Toyota itself is expecting a 40% split for the hybrid alone. This is a much bigger percentage compared to Honda, where it only expected 5% of all customers to buy the City Hybrid versus the regular petrol version. Toyota is a lot more confident with its hybrid technology. So confident that it is offering a full 8-year unlimited mileage warranty for the hybrid parts. That is the inverter, that is the battery, and even the electronic power control unit. Pretty much everything that revolves around the hybrid, it's covered for a full 8 years. Most other hybrid manufacturers only have a warranty for the battery pack itself and not the other ancillaries. Toyota is just so comfortable, so confident about its technology. Yeah, everything is covered. A really good case study for this technology is the use of the latest generation Toyota Prius as Grab vehicles in Singapore. Toyota claims that it has well over 400 cars there for the past 6 years, and each one on average has done over 150,000 kilometers. A few has even gone over 350 kilometers, and they've had a total of 0 hybrid failures. So in terms of reliability, in terms of its track record, it is looking very, very good for Toyota hybrid technology over here. Now in terms of resale value, where you would think that hybrid cars have low resale value compared to the regular petrol. From Toyota's own point of view, its previous hybrid car, the Camry Hybrid, actually had better resale value, was very strong even compared to the regular 2.0 model. So it is hoping that the same will repeat with this Corolla Cross Hybrid. To me, this is a very pleasant hybrid experience, extremely economical, and it really is as economical as it is claimed to be, and it's a smooth one as well, and at the same time so comfortable. So overall, I think this is an extremely easy car to recommend for anyone looking for a family SUV in this price range. What do you think? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you for watching and stay safe, everyone.